Welcome, everybody. I'm going to get us started. We are broadcasting today's Grants and Financial Management session as a webinar. So just as a reminder, there's people joining us online also, so we're going to get started. I'm going to turn it over to Steve Daniels, who has so graciously agreed to present today to share with you some really exciting information about financial management for your grants. So, Steve, the floor is yours.
I have to turn on the microphone. So if everybody would take out the 9130 and proceed to line 10A, we're going to start our financial oversight through line 10A. We'll work our way through times 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And it's going to be one of these kind of mind-bending things. Hopefully you all brought a calculator with you. Well, if that's what you were expecting today, you're in the wrong place. Because if you've ever been to one of my training sessions, I hate that kind of stuff. If you can't keep my attention, I got to have nothing to do with it. I've actually been to presentations where I've got up and I've walked out. Why? Because the presenter gave me a course of remedial reading. So if you're just coming to slide up there, read it to me. Send it to me in an email. I'll read it on my own because I can probably read faster than you can speak. So welcome. Has anybody here been to any of DOL-sponsored SMART training? I'm the only one. How did you like it? Wow. Okay, I'm not talking to you anymore today. Where are you from, by the way, Bob? Okay. Amy? Remind me not to talk to Bob, okay? Amy and I go way back, 20 minutes now, maybe. Okay, who else has been to our SMART training? Come on, somewhere. Mike, of course. You were a speaker, so you obviously loved it. Anybody? How'd you like it? Okay. Jesus. Such a testament, Brian. Okay. Yeah. How'd you like it? Okay. There you go. That's exactly right. Okay. Must have been one that I presented at, right? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Well, my name is Steve Daniels. I'm the Division Chief of the Division of Policy Review and Resolution. Don't ask me what that means because I don't know. I've been here about 5 years now, something like that. And at the end of this fiscal year, which is September 30th, I will retire. I'm going to go down and live in the house in Florida. My wife and I and our 2 cats travel the world, and I hopefully will be an adjunct professor at Flagler College in Jacksonville. At least that's the deal we've struck. So the Division of Policy Review and Resolution has a couple of units in it. We do policy, of course, and now that we have absorbed some of the other grant-making agencies within the Department of Labor, we do grants policy for them also. We also do audit resolution. Has anybody actually seen my name on a document? That's great. Because if you have, that means I will see you in court. Because I sign the final determinations where I believe we're going to litigate. So if you've actually seen my name, that's not a good thing. It means you have audit situations and audit problems. And instead of having lunch, you might want to come meet with the audit team. We also do closeout in our unit. So we have 2 policy teams. We do audit resolution, and we're the ones that actually close your grant. So you've probably talked to some of our closeout folks if you've had any other grants at the Department of Labor. Do any of you here have other grants other than the YCC grant? Geez, what's your name? Yeah, you. Yeah. My name is Yolanda? Well, welcome to our session. Fortunately, we're not too far into it, Yolanda, so you got a fair chance of passing the quiz at the midway point. If you can't pass the quiz at the midway point, I'm sorry I didn't mention this earlier, you have to leave. Okay. Yes, sir. You have WIOA grants? Great. So you have some of the state grants, or you're a subrecipient? From the state. You're from the state. Anybody else have anything other than just the YCC grant? Okay. Oh. Okay, great. But the rest of you are just YCC. Yes, sir?
We have a lot of corporate foundation grants. We also use parking grants from DOL, which I think most folks do. We have some state grants.
Okay, excellent. Yes, ma'am.
We have some CDC and other agencies.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both sides of the fence then, some of the new uniform guidance stuff, some of the other applicability, some of the new things that are going to be coming down the pike, as well as specifically your YCC grant, which is why we're all here in the first place. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we plan to talk about today is a number of topics. It doesn't go forward very well, huh? All right, so we got a number of things we're going to talk about. We're going to touch on the FOA if you'd like to. If not, you've already gotten the award. Hopefully any questions you may have had in that area are pretty well taken care of. There are a couple areas that we seem to have issues and questions on as time evolves. That is the area of indirect cost, your indirect cost where you have cost allocation plan or indirect cost rate agreement. And if you have questions on that now, because that's now going to be on your new 9130, we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. If you're doing a 425 from another agency, you're already familiar with a section that you're now going to see in our new 9130, which is going to be required on September the 30th. So the next quarter's 9130 changes from the old form to a new form. It's got some new fields in it, and some other fields have been taken away. If you have questions on match, I'm the guy you might want to ask because your match question is going to come to us in closeout or audit resolution, so we're the guys who are going to resolve it. So you have a question on match, please make sure that you clear it up before you leave today. And then, of course, we'll talk about closeout. You all are in year 2 of this grant? Year 2? How many more years you got? 2 more years. Okay, so you have 2 more years before you have to face and pay the piper for any errors you may have made along the way. But we don't want you to make errors, so let's get it all cleared up today. If you have anything on your mind, let me know. If I can't answer it, I got an FPO over here, Michael, I'm going to lateral to him quickly. You got an FPO over here, you got an FPO over here. Okay. These guys know that if I don't know the answer to the question, I'm just going to make it up. Good thing they're here because they'll say, Steve, we don't really want to do it that way, okay? So just that you know that I will make things up as I go along. I'm just kidding on that, of course. Okay, next slide, please. So as it relates to the funding opportunity announcement, some of the requirements within your particular award. We got a match requirement here. It happens to be 25%. As we probably know, we don't report match necessarily except at the end of the grant. You all had a unique thing, an anomaly in your match requirement, the funding opportunity announcement. And that is you had to show an escalating match percentage. So if it's 25% and it was X number of dollars, it had to kind of increase incrementally with each succeeding year. Everybody familiar with that? Some sign of life would be great. Yes, okay, good. All right, so your match has to increase. Have any of you been reporting your match annually or what have you on your 9130 or in your program progress report? Quarterly, okay, well, you would have to quarterly. In fact, you don't have to actually, under regulation, show match until the end of the grant. But what you're doing, if you're showing match along the way, that's excellent because at some point, if you put down that you're going to escalate your match from year to year to year, you're going to have to justify that and support that, okay? So, in general, have we been reporting our match along the way? Yeah? Okay, excellent. Have you been able to meet your match requirements along the way? Excellent. During the period of performance, we don't typically allow recipients to change the match requirement. We don't typically. If you have overstated your initial match, we ask for 25%, and you, for some reason, decided they're going to really love me if I match at 50%, if you've done that and it doesn't look good, you might want to tell your FPO right away when you get back, listen, Joe, I probably wasn't as square with you as I should have been. You know that $3 million I got to cough up? Probably not going to happen. And Joe says, well, Steve, how much do you think you're going to come up with? I'm going to struggle to make the 25%. Joe says, well, Steve, what are you telling me? Doesn't look good. I'm going to need some help. So I'm going to have to put on my best particular group of justifications to say, I'm not going to make it, but I do believe I'm going to make the 25% requirement, and you may have to ask for modification. Understanding we typically don't do that along the way. Why am I telling you this now? Well, this is critical for us all to understand that the new uniform guidance, which this grant isn't under, but everything you do in the future falls under this. Any money that you've received since 12/26/2014 falls under this rule, and that is this. The next time you apply for an award from any agency, that agency has to do a risk assessment and evaluation of your past performance. There's this thing called FAFIS, which your past performance goes into. We have our own internal systems at ETA, which your past performance goes into. So if you fail to meet match in the past, we are going to know that, and it will affect your ability to get an award in the future. Okay? So everybody's square on that. So if you don't think you're going to make it, let us know. Okay, good. So that's an escalating situation as we go along the way. We're going to see where we got to put those numbers on our new 9130 as we go along. We have an administrative cost limitation of about 10% in this particular announcement. When we get into that, and that's going to be on slides 21 and 22, we're going to go this in a little bit more detail. We'll talk about wages a little bit also between slides 17 and 20, and then we're going to talk about classrooms, some alterations. We don't allow major A&R alterations and renovations. That's not allowed, but some small renovations are allowed. So we'll touch on that a little bit, and we'll go into it deeper if you have questions on it. And then we're going to touch base on some of the salary limitations that may be affecting you. I got to tell you, I'm a Fed. I'm never knocking on the door of the salary cap. I'm kind of down here, cap's up here, but that's the way it is when you're a Fed. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we have this thing, this new uniform guidance. It has a real long, fancy name. Bottom line, it's called uniform guidance. You're in a good situation today if you have to deal with uniform guidance with any other grant, or you have any questions in general on the uniform guidance. Why? Because I'm one of the 8 people that wrote that. Okay, the COFAR is the Council of Financial Assistance, and as a COFAR member, the DOL is a COFAR member, I am the worker B-level guy. I'm the guy who actually writes the stuff. My boss is the senior staff member, and our chief financial officer is the actual member. So they never go, except when it comes time to vote on how we're going to fund the COFAR the following year. So the uniform guidance is found at 2 CFR Part 200. That's the new guidance. Your particular grant still falls under the old guidance unless you ask to move to the new guidance, and that's prior approval request. Did anybody ask for their YCC grant to move to the new guidance? You did. Okay, very good. Everybody else, as it relates to how we manage your grant under the Uniform Administrative Requirements and the cost principles, falls under the old guidance. Everything new, if you get incrementally funded from 12/26/2014 to today, that falls under the new guidance. The Department of Labor's exceptions to the uniform guidance are at 2 CFR Part 2900. 2 CFR Part 2900. Because I'm a COFAR member and I go to the meetings next month, Monday, it's fair to tell you that there will be another set of technical corrections coming out probably before this administration leaves office, and there will probably be a new NPRM. We're going to change some parts of the uniform guidance. Can't tell you what it is because it's going to be, one of those proposed regulations. Okay, we also within the Department of Labor may change one of our exceptions to the general rule, and we haven't cleared that yet internally. Next slide, please. So we have this new 9130 coming down the pipe. As you know, you submit that particular document on a quarterly basis, and as you send that puppy in, we take a peek at it, and in fact, your FPOs and your financial folks take a look at it and either accept it or reject it. So most recently, under the 9130, and this was our past form, and you go in electronically and you submit your electronic 9130. So you type in the information and your DOL staff have 10 days to accept it or not to accept it. Most recently, when we went through the 9130, you had experience perhaps with some of the new soft edits and hard edits that we put into the system. So we have a new process where when you enter numbers, if they don't mathematically jive with what we're supposed to be putting in there, they don't meet certain minimum or requirements, it's either a soft edit and you got a little notification, a dialog box came up, just so you know, this isn't right. There are hard edits that completely say, you can't submit this. This number is incorrect. Okay? So those were the most recent iterations of the 9130. Next slide. We have a new 9130 that's coming out, and it was approved, it says here, right here. Well, that's when the TIGA was approved. It's just been approved, and there is also a TIGA that goes along with it. So we have a new 9130 that you're going to be seeing in the new online system. New 9130, and there's some changes in this form. Okay, so on this 9130, you all got a nice little cheat sheet along with this thing here. Did everybody print this little document here on the 9130? okay? If you didn't, when you get back to your office, outstanding, good, you might want to take a peek at this document because in this 9130 document, we've listed the specific date by which your 9130 is due because some months may only have 28 days, 29 days, 30 days, 31 days. When we have the number of days that is due following the Uniform Administrative Requirements, we counted the actual number of days. So go by the dates that are listed here. If your submission date happens to fall on a Saturday or Sunday, the system's up and running, so go ahead and do your form. Not that I'm saying you got to work on a Saturday or Sunday, but the due date's the due date, so it's got to be in. The codicil that comes along with that is if you need technical assistance because of the new hard and soft edits, there won't be any available on the weekends, only during Monday through Friday during regular business hours. So your new 9130, take a peek at this document, take a look at it, print it out, keep it next to you if you're the financial person that has to submit this document. In addition to that, on the new 9130, there was also a set of instructions that comes along with this puppy. And so you want to take a look at the specific instructions for your 9130. And the only one I printed out was the basic form. If you're a state recipient, there's a whole bunch of other forms for the WIOA grants that you may be doing. Okay, so there are some new things going on with the new form. In fact, there are 8 new WIOA forms because of the specific requirements that are due. But you have a new basic form. Next slide. All right, so let's talk about this for a moment. If you have grants with other agencies, you're using the 425. So you're used to seeing the 425. Because of our statutory requirements here within ETA, we have our own form, 9130, that's OMB approved. Okay, so it's passed muster with PRA. The old form under section recipient shares, old line 10, L and M, those 2 lines that you may have used to been seeing, which is the recipient share of unliquidated obligations, and line 10M, total recipient obligations, have been deleted. So 2 lines are now gone off the old form. Notice that I said unliquidated obligations and recipient obligations. So as we talked to you, we eliminated these 2 because the new form allows for the calculation of those numbers without having to worry about what was going on in the old form, and the language is consistent to how you're supposed to report to us. So we want to talk about your accrued expenditures, not necessarily obligations, right? So the new form says your total recipient share required, and that's whatever you put down for your match. And so for me, when I'm working with Joe, I still got to put down the $6 million, okay? Had a little brain accident that day, put down a lot more than I thought I could actually get, because I thought it would look good on my application. Okay, so I'm going to put down that $6 million unless Joe says, okay, Steve, you can take it down to what it should have been, the $3 million. Okay, that's a prior approval request. You're going to have to do some serious talk if you want to reduce that number. Then my recipient share of my expenditures. How many of those matched dollars have been accrued and expended? So to be an accrued expenditure, that good or service has to have been delivered, right? Is everybody here an accountant? Am I the only one that's not an accountant? Okay. I'm a statistician by trade, just so you know. Not that you care. Okay, then we have the remaining share to be provided, which is a simple mathematical calculation, and the form will do that for itself. It'll do the math for you. Okay, and that's how much money is left to go. If you were straight line, it's pretty easy for your FPO or your program person to take a peek at it and go, looks good. If you're escalating, then we got to do a little math on our own part. So if you're growing by, 10%, 20%, 30% of the match and the balance, that's fine also. Okay. So one of the reasons we have escalating match is to show sustainability, that there are more and more people involved with your program. So hopefully the program that you're pioneering or working on will become a sustainable part of the organization and the business. Okay? Any questions on that? So we have some new pieces that we need to put in there. So the changes that we're making are really driven by WIOA, the uniform guidance in the 9130. We want to more closely align with the 425, the standard form, and so the other things that you're going to see in the 9130 really align us with the 425. Okay, next slide, please. So in addition here, we have line 10 on the new form. So line 10K, I don't know what to do with my new forms. Oh, here they are. No, got it here. Sorry, too much paper. So that particular line has been added in there for your recipient share of expenditures, and we kind of talked about that. All right, next one. We talked about this also, recipient share. Oh, well, let me make sure I do go through with you. Your recipient share on line 10J, if no match is required, it should be 0. That goes without saying. You have a required match, so there should be something in there. You want me in your selfie by any chance? I'm happy to get over there with you. You know. Your recipient share, and then line 10K. Your 10K can, of course, exceed whatever your required match is going to be, and then the math will take care of itself in the form. Okay, next slide. Indirect costs on this particular form. All right, in the past, our form did not match up with the 425. We didn't require indirect costs, so there is now a section that mirrors the 425 in which you place your indirect cost. Does everybody here have an indirect cost rate agreement with their cognizant agency? Everybody got one? You have an indirect cost rate? You think? Good. Okay. Because I was worried there. You're like, oh, yeah. I don't know what he's talking about there. And I'm the financial person. Okay. Everybody else have one? Yep. Okay, good. So now you're going to put your indirect cost information here, and we'll talk about that. I can come over at any time to help you with that. You and me. Okay. All right, so we're going to put in there the information that's required, and that's going to be your rate type, the base, and so on and so forth. Next slide, I think we go into this a little bit more. Okay, so your rate type here, you're going to have a provision rates, predetermined, fixed, carry forward, and so on. Perhaps you're also using the de minimis rate. Now, if your rate's with DOL, chances are you have a provisional rate, because that's predominantly what we issue. If your cognizant agency is another federal agency, you could have salary and wages, perhaps it's modified total direct costs. We don't do too much of those, so our rates tend to be on the provisional side. So you enter the kind of rate that you have, the percentage that's applied to the base that goes in the form. Also, you're going to do the approval dates. Those are the dates that this particular indirect cost rate agreement is good for, and the period of your indirect cost rate agreement. Okay. Does everybody's financial office actually do the mathematics on your base? Say it's modified total direct cost and it's 20%. Does everybody's financial shop actually tumble the number to the best of your ability? Knowledge. Okay, I'm here to give you some news. Closeout looks at every individual rate agreement that you have during the period of your award. So if it's 2 agreements because it's a multi-year agreement, or it's 1 year at a time, and maybe your particular indirect cost rate agreement doesn't match up with the period of performance of the grant, so maybe there's 4 or 5 or 6 indirect cost rate agreements involved, we will take your rate agreement for the periods within that grant that are your agreement's good for, and if your rate goes up and down, we will calculate that rate down to the penny for each one of the individual periods of your rate agreement. 90% of the time, the number is wrong. Okay? So if you've actually closed a grant with EPA's grant closeout shop, you've probably been talking, saying, hey, our number is a little different. We're going to share back with you what our calculation is, and we will. So we'll send you back an Excel spreadsheet with here's our calculation. We don't see many problems with salary and wages. That's pretty straightforward. We see a lot of calculation errors on modified total direct costs, and we see a lot of situations where the rate agreement is no longer valid. So we may have periods with no rate at all, or maybe our rate agreement, we didn't get it on a timely basis. So please be aware of those kinds of things as you approach closeout. If you're claiming indirect costs, make sure you got a valid rate agreement and that you're tracking it and placing it on your 9130. Yes, ma'am?
Oh, I'm sorry, no, I wasn't.
Your discretion. Gotcha. Yes, sir.
Okay. If a contractor the grantee is using has an indirect cost rate, does that go in this report here? Or?
Okay. This is a great question. Everybody hear this? The question that Brian asked is, do my subcontracts and subrecipients, for example, do their rate agreements also go into my particular form on indirect costs? No. Let's talk about this because this is also an area of confusion that we see frequently. If you are the prime recipient, if you are the recipient of the federal award, the only thing that goes in your 9130 is your rate agreement and your calculation. If you have a subrecipient, they will report that to you in whatever format you have requested as a pass-through entity. So if you're the prime recipient and you have two subawardees that are doing work and you've negotiated a rate with them, let's just say I'm making a sub 10% of salary and fringe benefits, then it's easy for you to calculate that number to make sure they're not trying to hoodoo you. What did salaries look like? What did fringe benefits look like? Multiply it times the rate. Done. As you move forward and get more grants, and it's now after 12/26/2014, this is an important piece to remember, and that is this. Your recipient, your subrecipient, is entitled to their indirect cost of rate agreement if they have a valid, federally approved indirect cost rate agreement with a federal agency. So if you all are pass-through entities, your subrecipient is entitled to their indirect costs. It's in the new uniform guidance. You got to pay them that number. Unless you talk with them and you say, hey, listen, we can't swing it. We'd like you, Amy, to be our subrecipient because we really like you. You did good work on the last time we worked together. And can you work with a reduced amount? And let's say that her rate's 25% modified total direct costs, and we tumble the number on the pass-through and say, I can live with 18%. Does that work for you? Amy may say yes. And she may also say, under the uniform guidance and the old uniform administrative requirements, can I use my unclaimed portion of indirect cost as matching cost sharing? The answer is yes. Thank you. Absolutely correct. Yeah, absolutely. So if we can't use the full rate because I just can't swing it as a pass-through entity, there is another benefit. You can use the unclaimed part as part of your cost sharing and match. And of course, we have a very significant number we got to attain here, so that's probably good news. Okay, is everybody clear on that? I'm sorry? Okay, if you have a contract and they have some kind of overhead cost, if they're charging you separately for overhead costs, at least you're going to see it, which is good, your G&A or whatever it might be. Well, nobody's indirect cost goes on, may I steal this? Nobody's indirect cost goes on the 9130 that you submit to ETA but your indirect cost. That's the only indirect cost that goes on it. Just yours. Thank you. I'm sorry. Anybody else's indirect cost, a pass-through entity or whomever, gets reported to you as the pass-through entity. Okay? It's reported to you as the pass-through entity. Stick it in the pocket, see if that works better. Okay. Are there any questions from you all as it relates to how do I apply my indirect costs? Everybody's good. Okay, great.
So this is maybe a little tangential, but if we are receiving corporate and philanthropic matching grants, let's say, and there is an indirect taken off those grants by, say, a large school district foundation, does that total count towards our match, or is it the total minus the indirect taken out counting towards our match? Is that question clear?
No.
Okay, so if I get a $650,000 grant from a company, and it passes through a foundation before it comes to me, and that foundation takes it indirect, so it's slightly, say, $620,000 that I'm ultimately using operationally, can I count the full $650 towards the match? Just the 620 that's operational.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, just making sure.
The actual cash money that you got to put against programmatic. So,
perfect.
Great question, though.
Thanks.
I have heard that one before, so yeah, great question. Okay, anybody else have a question on the indirect stuff? Ask now. Yes, sir.
Situation where the state is developing indirect cost rates for, say, school districts rather than the federal government. We require the federal government documentation, not the state's documentation.
Okay, this is a good question. The only rate that we will accept from a prime recipient, somebody that we're actually giving money to, is a NICRA, and that is an approved indirect cost rate agreement from a cognizant federal agency. If you are the pass-through entity, then it's incumbent upon you to take their approved indirect cost rate agreement that comes from a federal cognizant agency if it's an approved rate. It's incumbent upon you to take that rate. You do have some wiggle room. You can't say, can't stand that heat in the kitchen. It's too hot, as we talked about with Amy here a minute ago. That's a possibility. If they do not have a rate, then you've got to negotiate a rate. That becomes a little onerous because you've got to be really a mathematician or accountant to do that. If the state's ginned up a rate and you're the pass-through entity, that's up to you. I won't take it as a Fed. As a pass-through entity, that's your call, unless that pass-through entity also has a federally approved indirect cost rate agreement. Okay? Indirect costs are one of those areas that folks kind of, God, indirect costs, geez, the mathematics involved in this thing and what's included, what's excluded can be a little mind-bending. So if you have questions, please call us. If, as you're approaching closeout, you're unsure about your indirect costs, call the closeout unit. Anna Malero is the unit manager, and their whole unit's happy to plug things in because we'd rather fix it with you up front than fix it with you after the fact, especially if you're 100% expended. Then you have no more money. You're going to have to use stand-in costs. Okay. Any questions so far? All right, next slide. All right, so your indirect cost stuff now, as we get to your 9130 for closeout, you're going to do a couple of these things along the way. So as we're entering our rates in here, you're going to have multiple rates that are going in here. You may have to actually, drop down and provide some supplemental information. There aren't a lot of lines here, but it is possible, especially with your 4-year awards, that if I have an annual rate or a provisional rate with carryover, that you'll have multiple entries in here, okay? Provisional rate with carryover. So it's possible you're going to need some more lines, and we will ask you for every rate agreement that you have that covers your period of performance, because we will tumble this number to make sure that we're in sync, okay? That's part of your compliance. When your award ends, if you haven't ended an award with ETA yet, you're going to do a final quarterly report that's due on the date on the sheet that we had, wherever that sheet is. Yeah? This sheet. Oh, you and I aren't speaking, Bob. Oh, me. Right. Doggone it. Okay, you got me there. Okay, remember this form here? So you got to submit it on this date here. That's your quarterly one. Okay, so you got to submit that quarterly report that's due in 45 days after the close of that quarter. Then your final report, that's the final report. The correct name is your closeout 9130 is due in 90 days, and that's where you have to have expended, reported your expenditures of your accrued expenditures, not your unliquidated obligations, hence the change of the name of the form. Okay? So you got 2 forms that are due at the end of this whole shoot and match here. Questions on that? Okay, new 9130, new forms. The one that you just completed had some soft and hard edits in it. Got a few problems with that. Some states kicked out, some entities kicked out. We're addressing those right now, so hopefully in the next report you'll see everything will work just perfectly and as smooth as can be. Next slide. Oh, God, internal controls. Woo! Okay, internal controls, just the concept of internal controls gives me heartache. Why? Because the area is vague to most people. In the old days, life was fine. We had our Uniform Administrative Requirements, the cost principles, and A133. It was so great because in the old days we were prescriptive. We told you exactly what we needed, when we needed it, and what was acceptable and what was not acceptable. Life was fine. It was easy for me to go pull a citation. It says, you got to do this, 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 and this. You didn't do this one here, so you're in trouble. Now we got this thing called internal controls. And it's made life a little bit more difficult. And here's an area that with new recipients we have a lot of questions about. Is this internal control strong enough? Does this pass muster, or so on and so forth? So next slide. So in short, what we have done is we've moved from being very prescriptive because we had a lot of complaints about how prescriptive we were in our guidance documents to saying that as long as you have strong internal controls in place, you're probably going to be fine. Therein lies one of the issues. So your terms and conditions of award talk to having strong internal controls. The new section here that we're showing you up here, 303A, addresses specifically internal controls. It's also addressed under Closeout, if you're familiar with that. So there's more information as it relates to internal controls. I'm not going to dwell on it because most of you are still under the old requirements, so we're going to move forward from there. Next slide. Okay. As we talk about this briefly, though, internal controls simply means we need to make sure that not one person, for example, is doing everything. So I'm not the person who receives the invoice, for example. I'm not the person who writes the check. I'm not the person who approves it. And I'm not the person who signs the check. That's probably a pretty lousy set of internal controls. I'm happy to come over with you, too. Okay. All right, so that would be a very weak internal control. So we want to make sure we have segregations of duties. You have to have written policies and procedures, and importantly, as you start to shift and you have other awards going forward with other agencies that fall under the new uniform guidance, make sure you take a peek at Section 302, subparagraph A, because it talks about how you treat money and your written policies and procedures, and that's this. If you have other funding, your own funding, funding from other philanthropic sources, you have to spend my money, the federal money, as if it were your own. So you can't treat my money any differently than you treat your money, Bill Gates' money, and all those other folks who are giving you funds. They all have to be expended the same way. 302, subparagraph A. There's a bit here on financial reporting. I want to be clear about financial reporting because your match that you're going to document has to meet these particular requirements. And for that, I need the red folder. This is where I write my cheat sheet notes. Okay, so my documentation of all my financial stuff and my match has to follow 200-302, subparagraph B, subparagraph 1. Identification number, that's the federal award number, the expenditures, the federal program name, the FAIN, the CFDA, the name of the federal agency, and if you're the subrecipient, the name of your pass-through entity. As it relates to your records, you have to have your authorizations, obligations, expenditures, unobligated balances, assets, income, and interest, all supported with documentation. If you don't have the supporting documentation for all these pieces, when your FPO comes rolling into town, or your dispatch person, Jack, Michael, Brooke comes into town, you might get written up. Okay? Those are the requirements. Please make sure that you have that as it relates to match. Okay? You've got to support your match, and you've got to properly value it. Next slide, please. Salaries and personnel. Okay, we all know that I'm underpaid for the great work that I do. I think we're all in agreement on that. Except Bob here. Bob doesn't agree. Bob says, good thing you're retiring, Steve. You get rid of you. Okay, so basic standards for documentation. We talked about that as well as our internal controls under the uniform guidance. Almost everything that's in the uniform, next slide. Almost everything in the uniform guidance is pretty darn intuitive. If we're financial people, we know everything that's up here already. Okay, there's no new news. And if you don't have the things that are listed on this slide, you're going to have a shortfall, a deficiency, and when your FPO comes rolling into town, your dispatch staff person, your OIG auditor, your A133 auditor, you're probably going to have some findings, administrative findings, and perhaps some question costs. Next slide. So if we're hiring people and we've not hired these kinds of folks before, and that could possibly happen when you get into a new grant situation, folks with new skill sets come on board, you have to pay those new people consistent with whatever your going rate is for like jobs, like work. If you don't have that particular like work within your organization, what's the fair market value of whatever that person is doing? And don't forget your salary. Oh, that reminds me. So let's say, for example, Joe here, let's say Joe is an executive, okay? And Joe is making a ton of money, okay? And Joe is going to contribute to match. He's going to contribute to match. But he's an executive, and what he wants to do, because Joe's a giving guy, is he's going to clock out, he's going to clock back in, and he's basically going to be the reception person at this event on a weekend. I'm making this all up. So he's going to be kind of a reception person. He's going to say, yes, okay, you want to, yes, that's over here. Yeah, okay, that's over here. Okay, yeah, that's over here with Bob. Okay? So when we start to calculate match as a third-party in-kind contribution, because he's not getting paid, it's not cash, because we all know cash is cash, everything else is third-party in-kind contribution, because if he's using my grant, he's a third party, he's the third-party in-kind contribution, because I'm the party of the first part. I am the giver of the money. He is the party of the second part. He is the recipient of the grant. Party of the third part is him volunteering his time. He's a third-party in-kind contributor. Yes? Okay, trust me on that if you don't. Okay, so that's a third-party in-kind contribution. So we do the mathematics, and it comes to the 2 hours he spent there, $680, because that's what he normally earns if I extend it out over the number of hours. That's good, right? You're absolutely correct. It is not right. Why isn't it right?
The market value of the work that I was doing was not the work of an executive.
Yes. Everybody got that. Everybody good? Outstanding. Thank you. Smart group here today. Love it. Next slide. Yes, sir.
So a question on that. So I'm not sure we're in this situation, but maybe.
Okay.
Right? So we do a lot of work-based learning where our students will go out to companies, and those companies, in effect, some with internships, maybe some with the apprenticeships, it is productive, but the other, the job shadowing, the mentoring, that is not productive work for them. And these executives and all these folks are spending their time on it, but it's not like as a reception, at an event. So I think there's maybe some gray area there. I mean, it is their time on. They're not clocking out. It's their work day at that company, hosting our students, mentoring our students, teaching them about what they do. Should we be, calculating it based on the market rate for what they would normally do in their roles, or is there some other?
Everybody hear this question? This is a great question. Okay, so you're normally making gobs of money. In fact, you're over my salary cap, Joe. Okay? But he's got Amy as a trainee working with Joe. She's shadowing him. And he's saying, this is the life of an executive. Okay? Under that situation, what do we pay Joe? What's the value of his match? Job. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's what he does, and we're hoping Amy will go, wow, I got to get a cushy job like that. Look at the view. Okay? You need to come to my office. You want to see a view. Homeless shelter. Okay. Yeah, true. Sad but true. Okay, whereas when I was with AUA, I'd look out my window and I'd see the Capitol. It's a beautiful thing. So what can you do? Okay, now let's say that Joe, he runs a huge organization. But let's say by trade, Joe's really a carpenter. Okay? That's where his skill sets are. Okay, makes cabinets and yada da da da. Okay? So in this case now, Bob, right?
Right.
Bob is going to work with Joe, but not mentoring and Joe's not shadowing or mentoring in this case. He's actually going to be doing spending some time actually teaching some carpentry skills to Bob. So he's leading that class that day. Or maybe Bob shows unique talent in finishing. Well, we got the expertise here on finishing. How do we do the fine sanding and varnishing and then steel blowing it and all that? So just a mirror finish. Now what's this time worth as a match for a third-party in-kind contribution? Exactly right. I think you got it. Good question. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have salary caps and limitations. I'm going to cut to the chase on this. If you have anything that's funded under WIOA Title 1B, that's the formula awards, Title 1D, the national programs, it's in the law. The most you can get paid is executive level 2. That changes every year. All you got to do is go to the OPM website, look at what executive level 2 pays. That's the salary cap. This year, it's $185,100. The other thing is, for all other awards, every year since I've been here, our appropriation also caps what you can make, and it's at executive level 2. You can tell I'm not an executive, as I've already admitted, I'm not even close to that, so I'm just a worker bee. So, go into the OPM website. Our programs are capped at executive level 2. We have 2 governing statutes, our appropriation and WIOA. Next slide, please. Ooh, administrative costs. So for administrative costs, I have this fabulous cheat sheet. Has everybody seen this cheat sheet before? You're gonna love it. If I wasn't an honest guy, I would lie to you and tell you I wrote it, but I did not. Our old policy chief wrote it, Maggie Yule, who abandoned me, and have had abandonment issues ever since. All right, so administrative costs. You have a cost limitation of 10% on your administrative costs. If you've ever wondered, geez, is this cost administrative costs or not? We have the greatest cheat sheet for you right here. Okay, these are going to be things that are administrative costs. The other things are going to be programmatic costs. So it's a pretty straightforward cheat sheet. You got a young lady named Maggie, you will gin this up. I happen to use it, keep a copy by my desk site because I get administrative cost questions all the time. Hey, Steve, is this administrative cost or is this a program cost? Great little guidance tool. Please keep it handy. Make copies of it. It's a fantastic little sheet that I think you're going to like as you move down the pipe. Okay, next slide. Cash management. Let's talk about the money. Comes up quite a bit. So importantly, according to the old Uniform Administrative Requirements and old Treasury circulars, and now codified in the new Uniform Guide, you need to minimize the amount of time between the time you take money out of PMS and the time you actually disperse the funds. In general, in terms of days, how many days is that? Wild guess. 2 or 3 days. In fact, the old Treasury Circular number 3 said 3 days. Okay? The old Treasury Circular said 3 days. We do see situations, and the financial folks will attest to this in your FPOs, where we have significant cash on hand balances. Not a good thing. Okay? Not a good thing. So we want to disperse money from PMS and put it into our bank account, hopefully an insured bank account, though it's not required. If you have a separate account for your ETA grant, that's even better, but not required. Here's one of the other things that we see. In this day and age of bad and fragile financial institutions that cause us a little bit of worry are those balances that you leave overnight. So I disperse, I'm making this up, $400,000, and it sits in the bank night after night after night because I haven't dispersed the funds. We worry about that a little bit because if that bank folds up, you're covered up to how much? Exactly right. All the rest of that money, poof, it's gone. You can't come to us and ask.
How much, Steve? They can't hear you on the webinar.
$250,000. Okay, it's gone. And once it's gone, it's gone. You can't come back to us and ask because we've already spent the money. You'll make us anti-deficient if we had to cough up more money. So what do you do to keep those balances within the insured level? What do you do? What does anybody here actually do? Okay. Hopefully typically when you've dispersed the funds, it is in view of an immediate need, and you're able to disperse funds to get below the $250,000. If it exceeds $250,000, then it behooves you to move the money to another account. To make sure it's protected, we require that it be an insured account. It's not insured, it's all in one account. There are financial institutions that will sweep the money and put it somewhere else for you. Okay? So I'm not telling you you have to do it, but if you lose the money, we're going to come back to you and cite the regulations that says this money's got to be insured. Okay? If it's a solid financial institution, I probably wouldn't worry about it a lot, but if your guy's on the fence, and you know he's on the fence, you need to change financial institutions. Next slide. Purchasing and contracting. It's one of my favorite areas in the whole wide world. Here's the bottom line. For the most part, you must conduct a free and open competition. That's pretty straightforward. Okay? Free and open competition. Next slide. There are different types of acquisition. Let's talk about this. We invented the COFAR. We invented something that we put into the regulation, micro-purchases. Those of you who are with the federal government contract go, you didn't invent that, that's been around. Yeah, okay, so we stole it. Shamelessly, I might add, because we don't regret that for a minute. So we have this thing called a micro-purchase threshold that is established, and currently it's at $3,500. When we first issued the uniform guidance, it was at $3,000. So whatever the federal micro-purchase level is, which is the level that we can make credit card purchases in the federal government without having anybody approve it, same thing applies for our recipients. So if Bob wants to go out and purchase something for $3,335, what does he need to do at the micro-purchase threshold? No, sir, but thank you for the answer. Okay, this is the new piece in the micro-purchase threshold. All Bob has to do is say, looks good to me. You with me? The exact words in the uniform guidance are, got to be reasonable. Well, Bob's reasonable, my reasonable may be two different things. But we had a lot of feedback after the NPR saying, oh my God, it's so onerous and constricting. My God, you guys tell me what to do. All right, up to $3,500, you get to do what you want to do. Doesn't have to have a contracting office, anybody's prior approval. Just go buy it. There's a codicil attached to that. If you bought pens, and my favorite silver gold pens that Brian likes to buy, this gold pen, and it's $500, your FPO or your dispatch person may come in and say, man, that's a lot of pens for doing reports. And Brian may say, yes, but they're your reports and they're important to me. It needs to be a gold pen. Okay, that's one of those, is it necessary and reasonable? And, you know, we can get into an argument about that. The other piece you always have to remember when you're doing any kind of procurement is small and minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. You got to pass the money around. So because I like Bob or Bob likes Joe, he can't give all of his business to Joe. He's got to give a little bit to Brian. He's got to pass it around. So when your FBO comes into town, your dispatch person comes into town, he can't see all of your micro purchases all going to one guy. Can't happen. Got to spread it around. The next level up is a small purchase. Okay, so between the micro purchase threshold and the simplified acquisition threshold, we now have this thing called the small purchase arena. And the requirements here are kind of nifty. I got to look and see what the going rate should be. So again, if I'm buying pens, I'm going to look at Office Depot, Office Max, Office whomever, and see what the going rate is. So I got to do a little research. And if they all look pretty good, then I can kind of pick, remembering I always got to pass the money around. Can't do all my business with one vendor. Okay, got to pass around a little bit. Once we exceed the simplified acquisition threshold, all of the other procurement standards kick into place. So if you're with a state, you follow your own regulations and your policies that are written. If you're anybody else, then you have to have written policies that are at least as strong as the uniform guidance, or the old uniform administrative requirements under procurement. So that involves, do I do sealed bids, competitive proposals, or I'm not going to compete the darn thing because there's only one person in the whole wide world that does that. That's just kind of hard to believe, but that's what it says. Okay, so my competitive proposal, if I'm doing that, I don't always have to choose the lowest bid, right? Right. There's a little level of reasonableness goes into this and past performance and history. So if I happen to know that Reggie's bid is the lowest, but I know that Amy's work, that I've done work with her in the past, is the best, and she's just a few shekels higher than Reggie's bid, I can pick Amy, right? Absolutely, just got to be able to justify it. Remembering, too, at all times, if your Fed asks you for your procurement policies and procedures and your decision process on your procurement, that must be immediately made available to your Fed. Next slide. Yes, sir.
I just want to say a lot of school districts, state, local governments probably.
A lot of state, school districts, local governments probably have different levels of thresholds, and that's something as an FPO we always say, what is your policy? We hold you to that policy. So that 3,500, you might actually have a much lower threshold for the quotes you need to get.
Absolutely. Good. Thank you, Michael. That's perfectly fine. Okay, let's look at types of costs. This is pretty straightforward. We either have a direct cost and indirect cost, and in your grants, either program costs or administrative costs. Any questions on that? Outstanding. Next slide. Next slide. So when we have direct costs, it's very possible if I'm running a significant organization under direct costs that a particular cost isn't directly allocable to one specific award, right? It could be allocable to multiple funding streams and multiple projects. So when these kinds of situations occur, I have to have a cost allocation plan. So that cost allocation plan indicates I have 3 funding streams, 5 grants under these 3 funding streams for whatever crazy reason. And I have costs, direct costs. Well, I need to share those direct costs. Let's say it's somebody who's at the front that greets people or my receptionist or what have you. I've got to share that individual's costs across all of my programs, okay? I have to share it based upon the relative benefit from those other programs. I've got to share it based upon the relative benefit. Next slide. Okay, so we talked here about the cost allocation plan. You must have a cost allocation plan in place when you have multiple funding streams, multiple grants, or you're going to have shared costs on a direct basis. Got to have a cost allocation plan in place. It's got to be in writing and available for inspection by any Fed. Next slide. As it relates to indirect costs, you're entitled to receive your indirect costs. Indirect costs are those costs that aren't easily and directly allocable to a particular funding stream or grant program, indirect costs. Next slide. So our indirect cost rate calculation is very simple in terms of what do we do to gin up an indirect cost rate. We have our indirect cost pool divided by our total indirect costs. It's not that easy. That's just the formula. Because involved with this is what goes into the multiple indirect cost pools and what are my direct cost bases. So it's not as easy as the formula looks up there. The bottom line is this: if you're not the accountant getting up the various pools, submitting it to Victor Lopez's shop here at DOL, you've got the easy part. All you do is some simple mathematics. This is the tough part of negotiating your indirect cost rate, because we're going to ask about what's in the pool. Are they like pools? Are they similar pools? How are we sharing these costs and benefits? Next slide. Am I okay time-wise? I'm tight, aren't I? I'm trying to pick it up.
2 minutes.
Okay. The de minimis rate. Has everybody heard about the de minimis rate? Okay. This is important to you as you move forward. What is the de minimis rate? If I don't currently have a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement with a cognizant agency, and I've never had a negotiated rate, if I'm a prime recipient or I'm a pass-through entity or I am an I'm a subrecipient, I am entitled to take the de minimis rate. Okay? I am entitled to the de minimis rate. So if you have a subrecipient and they've never had an indirect cost rate agreement before, they can take the de minimis rate. They simply have to say to you, have you ever had a rate? I don't currently have a rate, and I'd like to claim the de minimis minimis rate. The de minimis rate is 10% of modified total direct cost. Okay, 10% modified total direct cost. So anybody's entitled to take that if they never had a rate, currently don't have a rate. Next slide. Okay, matching and cost sharing under the old regs and the new regs. All right, next slide. So we have to have some cost sharing and match these days now. So as it relates to our cost sharing and match, out of the new uniform guidance, and this is also very similar into the old guidance, Part 95 and 97, there are certain things that have to be available in your records. Okay, so any cost sharing or match that you're going to claim has to be verifiable from your records. Got to be verifiable. Not included as contributions from any other federal award or used for any other federal award. There is one codicil to that, and that's AmeriCorps. It's necessary and reasonable for the accomplishment of the grant program requirements are allowable under subpart E. So if it's not an allowable cost, you can't claim it as cost sharing and match. And it's provided for in the approved budget, and it conforms to other provisions of the administrative requirements. All the record requirements that we talked about earlier, the 7 record requirements, are also in place. So you have to have the source documentation available for inspection. Got to be able to justify that cost sharing and match. Next slide. So I think we've talked about this a little bit. Your match requirement is 25%, supposed to be on an escalating basis. Cash is cash, in-kind is in-kind. Third-party in-kind contributions. Next slide. So we have some exclusions, and we've talked about that already. If it's not allowable cost, you can't claim it as match. If it comes from another program, you can't claim it as match. Expenditures of program income, can't claim it as match. Next slide. We've got to be able to properly evaluate and value match. Yes, sir?
Just back to the one on the match. So if we end up meeting our match, pretty high early on, say if year 1 or year 2, does it need to continue to escalate if we're already hitting that 25% threshold, or does it, so in other words, could we be required to exceed 25% if we are getting a lot of match in the first year or 2?
Great question. Everybody hear the question? Okay, so if he's made his if he's made his match to 25% in year 1, does he have to make more and more and more and more? No. Legally, you're obligated to be, because it's in your notice of award, to give me the 25%. If you don't make the 25%, you're going to have a proportional reduction in your federal dollars. Why? Because match is expressed as a share, a percentage of the dollars. So if I got $1 million, I have to match 25%, then you're going to owe me $250,000. You make it all in one shot up front, you're there. Did you meet the program requirements if you're not going to get any more match? Not really. Because we said we want to show sustainability. But from a legal perspective, you made it, you're home free. It's probably not what we were looking for under the program, because if you have no more match, the program might not be sustainable. Your FPO may write you up and say, hit all the match in year 1, but I'm questioning whether or not this program is going to have legs. They don't seem to have any other resources, da-da-da-da. Okay? In fact, good question. In fact, you're only required to have made match legally by the day the grant ends, the period of performance. Okay? Legally. If you haven't shown me a penny up till then, but all of a sudden at the very end you cough up to $250,000, you made your match requirements. So from a closeout perspective, we're going to be fine. From an FPO and a program perspective, and how your performances are going to be reviewed, then there may be questions, because if you made it all up front and you didn't do what the program objectives were, there may be some other conversations with your federal project officer about what happened with this grant. Okay? Great question. Okay, we talked about evaluating match. Everybody's good on that? I apologize. If you have to go to lunch, go. If there's just one person left, I will stay and talk to this one person who's left. Okay, we talked about documenting match. Those were the items I read out of this file folder here as it relates to authorization obligations and making sure you have source documentation. Audit. Audit resolution happens to be in one of my shops, so we're very familiar with audit resolution. If you expend over $750,000 in a year, you've got to have an A133 audit. You pick the auditor, and you have to be able to answer and respond to any of the audit findings that you may have. Records management, next slide. One more. Okay, records management. Bottom line is this. You've got to keep your records for 3 years from the point in time that it was accepted. So if it's indirect cost rate agreement, from the point in time that your proposal was accepted, those documents must be retained for 3 years. If it grants over and it comes to closeout, at the point in time your last financial report, your program progress report, was accepted by ETA, that's how long you have to keep those records. It's not from the date of submission, it's the date of acceptance. If there is an open audit and we haven't closed the award, the clock hasn't started yet. Okay, so if the grant's still open, clock hasn't started yet. Next slide, close out. Okay. Got to keep, got to maintain the records. These are federal requirements, regulations for records management. Okay, 3 years. The point in time that we accept it, not submission, acceptance. Okay, for your YCC grant, as you approach closeout, there could be some things you got to do. Disposition of your equipment. Call us if you have equipment. In fact, when you get your closeout package from us, it'll ask you for a listing of your equipment, and if you need disposition instructions, we'll provide those to you. Always make sure you've closed your subawards before you start your closeout process with us. So if your subaward runs to the end of your period of performance, you're going to have a problem getting everything in on time. Subaward should always close before then. Make sure you've met your match requirements and you reconcile everything that you have to reconcile. Next slide. We talked about your 29130s. The quarterly report as well as your closeout report. And next slide. Talked about that. We've talked about match already, and I think that's it. All right. What questions do you have for me? And thank you so much for your time. Questions? Anybody? I'll be available to do the selfie. Anything? Yes, ma'am.
In one of your first slides, you mentioned something about money, renovations, construction, that no money could be used for that?
Oh, no, minor A&R? Yes.
Okay. In our grant, we put in that we were doing renovations, and it was all accepted, so you're making me very nervous right now.
Yeah. Those kind of things, you need to go back to your FPO and make sure the circle's around and request prior approval.
Okay.
It's like that with equipment. It's one of our exceptions.
It was in our original grant.
And it's approved and started.
We've gone down in the amount of money that we were spending on it, but it's work that is already being done that was already, we were already told that it was
Make sure you get back to your FPO.
Okay.
Okay. Because you got
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this webinar today. We are going to close out. Thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah. Just make the circle around with your FPO and say, hey, by the way, this line item on my approved budget, we're doing it. Send an email to your FPO. That'll do it. Do I want in? Minor A&R is an allowable cost.